Right now, I'm drawing a Venn diagram, and in it are two different film genres. I'm going to put sci-fi over here on the left, and on the right, I'm going to go with satire. Now, if I start writing down a bunch of movies I like, that middle section's going to start getting pretty crowded. It's not like I'm a real film critic or anything, so this is just kind of my take here, but I think it's because both satire and sci-fi are pretty good ways to view society. Almost like a social mirror or something.
If you don't, if you won't, if you fail to understand, then the same incredible terror that's menacing me...
Take Invasion of the Body Snatchers, one of the all-time classics. It's pretty out there plot-wise. Alien spores sprouting up and replacing members of a small town. Seems crazy. But the whole idea of a hidden enemy from within, not being able to trust your neighbors or even your own spouse, that's peak Cold War paranoia right there. And it was easier to make a film about it than talk about it at the time.
Bringing a new dimension in terror to the giant super scope screen.
Whatever intelligence or instinct...
I think that trend has continued through the decades.
You can't walk around in your own world and sort of your own relationships or your own country and government stuff and all that and look at it as, oh, this is such a hilarious satirical thing, because it's happening to you and it's happening constantly. It's all around there. But if you're watching a story that is completely satirical and ridiculous, but it's still talking about the same topics, it allows you to really view those things a little bit deeper, a little bit from a different perspective.
That's Timo Vuorensola, a filmmaker based in Finland, best known for his 2012 feature action comedy film Iron Sky, and its follow-up in 2018. Before that, he directed a satire called Star Trek in the Pirkinning. You can probably guess from the title that it's a Star Trek satire, though it's got some pretty heavy Babylon 5 references. And by the way, Star Trek is in my Venn diagram. I'm going to go ahead and put it down right here. This hilarious film is the brainchild of Samuli Torrenson, another Finnish filmmaker who created Star Trek back in the early 90s when he was just a kid, kind of making these short animations. By 1998, he decided to make a live-action feature-length film. And he did, it just took 7 years. Shot mainly in Torrenson's mom's basement, and later a 2-room apartment using mostly blue screen technology, amateur actors and crew members learning as they went along, and basically no budget, this was a true DIY enterprise. Timo was hired to direct the movie and also co-starred, despite having no real acting experience. Again, kind of keeping with the fly-by-the-seat-of-your-pants mentality these guys had. When Star Trek finally came out in 2005, it was groundbreaking, partially for its visual effects, partially for how comedic it was, but mostly because it was the first ever feature film to be distributed online for free. YouTube was brand new, and video streaming as we know it simply didn't exist. So they distributed the film on a BitTorrent network.
When we were thinking about how do we distribute this, because we can't really put this onto the internet and then put it on a server and let people download it, because that was very expensive then. But then we researched and started to think about the torrent technology and decided that, you know what, we're going to use BitTorrent as our main method.
Somehow it caught on. In less than 2 weeks, more than 1 million people downloaded the movie. And with English subtitles, it was a big hit all over the world, launching it to cult follower status and paving the way for DIY filmmakers in the digital era. My name is Stuart, and this is Crew Collective, a podcast about storytelling. Each episode, we explore the stories that help shape us. Books, movies, songs, anything. We'll talk to creators about their process, their craft, and the worlds they build. In Season 1, we're exploring space stories, so that's where Star Trek fits in. And my conversation with its director is next.
Crew Collective is brought to you by Rocket Genius, makers of Gravity Forms. Gravity Forms was the first premium WordPress contact form plugin launched in the space over 15 years ago. Since then, Brands like NASA, Delta, and Stanford University have relied on Gravity Forms for their WordPress form data. But so have tens of thousands of freelancers, agencies, and small creators, powering payment forms to newsletter signups. For small and large alike, Gravity Forms understands their mission: build amazing software that people trust. Learn more at gravity.com. And we trust you enjoy Crew Collective as much as the team at Rocket Genius did making it.
And now, my conversation with Timo Vuorensola, the director of films Star Trek Into Pirkinning and Iron Sky.
In the beginning, the idea, let's do a short thing, but then as we started working on it, we started like, this is such a huge amount of work. Why don't we, instead of just doing let's just do a feature movie. Then we at least have a feature movie. And it sounded like a good idea back then. We thought, but it's not going to be that much more different if you do a, 50-minute short film, or if we do 1 hour, 30 minutes, 90-minute feature film. But I mean, obviously, we were quite wrong about that, because making a short film is a whole different thing than making a feature film. And in addition to that, because the tools and the possibilities, they expanded as we worked on the project, we had to revisit what we shot, 3 years ago and just reshoot it. So we basically had to shoot the movie at least, I think, 2 or 3 times over and over again, because we wanted to make it better quality. We had more this and that, and we got to go back and redo that and all that. So in addition for it being quite slow, in addition to that, we also really remade it a couple of times before we got into the final form. But I think and the other thing is, like, obviously we were not professional in that sense, like we were all working or studying and stuff like that. So we had to really find time to do it. Samuli was, I think, doing this more or less full time, all of his time. I know that he was also working for something else, but he was mainly doing this as his thing. But me and rest of the crew, we had to find times over the weekends or over holidays or evenings to make time to be able to actually work on this. So that's the other reason why it really took so long to finish the whole thing.
Yeah, and you guys probably just physically changed a lot over 7 years. So I mean, did that create any challenges with continuity and shooting the film?
Yeah.
Because we all age.
We do age, and obviously at that age, when we are like 18 to 25, that's a time when people change quite a lot. But that was actually one of the things that Samuli was always the most worried about. He was always like, don't cut your hair, don't become bigger, or don't lose weight, or don't do this and this. He was always very much trying to make sure that we remained as same looking as possible. And obviously, especially, those who were in front of the camera. And that was, we did change quite a lot through that time. But also, we really made an effort to try to stay looking the same. And again, it was possible because we didn't have any other film jobs, or the actors were not professionals where they had to change for different kind of jobs. We were just a bunch of friends who didn't really have a lot of other lives than this film. So in that sense, it was a little bit easier. Nowadays, it would be obviously quite a big ask to tell somebody that, stay looking like same for 7 years, don't change anything. But then it wasn't such a huge issue.
Did you guys, at the time, being new to this, understand that you needed a script supervisor, particularly with something, again, that spans 7 years, a script supervisor to make sure people's... No,
I remember when I actually made my first professional film, Iron Sky, and I came to the first shooting day on the set, and there was this girl sitting next to me on the set, and it was the very first shooting day. And this is obviously after I had done Star Trek. And then we did the shooting day, and I was watching her making some notes on her paper. And at the end of the first shooting day, I turned to her and I said, "What are you doing, actually?" And she said, "I'm a script supervisor." And I thought, okay, so can you tell me, what does a script supervisor do? And she told me, "Oh, I'm doing this and this and this." I said, "Oh, that sounds great. I should have had one of you when I was doing Star Trek," because we didn't have a script supervisor, so we didn't have any we didn't have any of those positions that you would have needed to make it easier. But somehow it because this was all that we were doing, it was possible to keep some sort of a track how things progressed. And again, Samuli was kind of doing partially that, and also had a associate or sort of assistant director, Atte, who was also keeping the notes and everything. So there was kind of some sort of a note system, but not like an official script supervisor position, definitely not over those 7 years. No.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine on a more polished professional set like Iron Sky, a lot of that work gets streamlined, so it doesn't
Absolutely,
take.
yeah. And you have to, because there's so many. You don't have the luxury of time. That's the important thing about making your first film. First film is the only time in your career when you have the luxury of time. So and obviously that's something that I always say to young filmmakers, like, when you make your first film, enjoy the fact that you have the luxury of time. So but when you start doing more professionally, the time gets absolutely squeezed. So everything needs to be ticking like a clock, and it needs to happen very precisely and following a very sort of formal structure. And then all of these positions are very, very important. But back in those days, we didn't have the time pressure so much, so we were able to fuck around and find out. And sometimes it was a very good learning experience, but of course we also did a lot of mistakes as we made that movie, but hopefully we learned something also from those.
Yeah, I know you were documenting everything as it happened, and there's that behind the scenes documentary you guys shot, and there's that one scene where you guys realized that you had accidentally recorded over somebody's dialogue, and then that person was out of the country, and Torrenson kind of, there's this, you can kind of see the escalation before he has a little bit of a meltdown.
It was like one of those things, is like, because we were shooting, we had tapes, we didn't have a digital in that sense, so we were shooting on tapes. And obviously then it was just one of those situations that then after half a day shooting, we're like, did you, by the way, remember to replace the tape? And then fuck, no. And it was also, I remember it was a very tricky scene that we had shot, and it was a painful scene to do. We recorded over it. But then, you do that once in your career, you mess up the footage, and then you'll never do it again.
Yeah, probably better it happened then than when you got into like a higher budget studio with network bosses and all that.
Yeah, I can't even believe what it would happen. I mean, you would be very, if you had messed it up, you would be liable for huge damages nowadays, in the way films I make nowadays. But back in those days, it was a nuisance and a real meltdown, because everybody was working so hard, and then we got to do it again. But then that was all that it was, and then we did it, and we did it even better than the first time. So in a way, it probably was a good reason anyway for that.
One of the parts about this whole process and story that I think is kind of hilarious is you guys booked a cruise ship, or booked yourselves spots on a cruise ship, basically to shoot just a couple scenes, right? There's that scene with Perk in the captain's quarters.
Yeah, correct. And we did that because in Finland there is this big cruise ships that go between Finland and Sweden. They're basically floating it's a booze cruise kind of thing. It's a floating kind of restaurant / shopping mall, which it is, and it goes back and forth every day. So we booked and asked for permission to shoot on there, and we actually shot there 2 scenes. We shot one sequence which ended up in the movie. We shot another one which was kind of a nightclub scene, which for some reason never ended up in the movie. It was one of the few scenes that we actually ended up cutting. I think it just wasn't really good, I think, in some weird way. But we shot 2 scenes that ended up in the movie. The only problem was that we were young and and I got a little bit too excited about the fact that we were on this cruise and we started to have a few drinks while we were shooting and ended up actually in quite a quite a drunken state by the time we were supposed to really start shooting. And I was really out of the picture then. And then, luckily, I had my assistant director, Atte, who plays also one of the characters. And he said that, you know what, Timo, I think it's better that I take care of this because you are not in a shape to shoot this. And he was right. And that's another one of those. You do that mistake once in your lifetime and then never again, you never, ever, ever, ever drink on the job. But then on that specific day and on that specific shoot, I did. And I learned a very valuable lesson also there. Luckily, that turned into a nice scene anyway. I mean, he did a good job directing it. So it turned into a nice thing. But then, I wasn't very proud of that moment because of my inability to participate.
It is documented forever. It's out there, so
it's out there. I know, and I edited that document, and I said, I'm gonna put this in there just as a reminder for myself and as a punishment for myself. And not proud of it, but hey, it happened.
Starek tells the story of a guy named James Perk, played by Torrenson, and his friend Dorf, played by Timo, who through a time travel mishap are stuck in present-day Earth, which Perk conquers and declares himself emperor. They eventually end up traveling through a parallel universe where they encounter a space station known as Babel 13, and you can kind of see where the parodies are here. There's space battles, time travel, and at times, near shot-for-shot parodies from various Star Trek films. To do all this, they employed the use of blue screen technology to create a universe from a basement.
Yeah, I think blue screen technology for me was the biggest revelation when I first saw somebody using it because, like I said, I did this short Star Trek film with him as an actor, and I just went to his place and was saying stuff in front of a blue screen. And then eventually, when I saw the movie, I was really blown away. It's like, my God, I didn't realize that you can really change the background into a spaceship, bridge and stuff like that. And that really opened my eyes into those possibilities. But obviously, the other tools that we were using was the 3D technology and 3D animation, which was something that Samuli had been interested all of his life, and with Star Trek films, he started to really explore and really challenge what you can do with sort of home programs that had just become available, 3D Max, and which became available for consumer scale use, and you could do it on your computer because that was really the time when the computer started to become more and more effective and more powerful. So that was obviously the very key thing that we had to have. We had to master that, and Samuli really took that. And eventually, Samuli started to work on, after Star Trek and after Iron Sky, he created a very heavy-duty visual effects company and another one. And so sort of these are the things that he is now doing. So those technologies were very much important for us to be able to do that movie.
Was it like weird coming in and having to direct Samuel in what was essentially his baby? I mean, he'd been working on this since he was a kid.
Truthfully, it was very collaborative with Star Trek. Like I really enjoyed in trying to get actors to do this thing that they needed to do. Samuli had very clear understanding of what are the pieces that are needed for him to be able to put this puzzle together, and we really had to sync together there wasn't a room for separate visions. We had to be really working on the same thing, and we did, and that's really worked very well and very closely through the process of that. And then obviously with Samuli directing him, and he was, of course, none of us were professional actors, but Samuli was the guy who was all the time on the screen, and he had to really be there. The easy thing was that for him, the character of Pirk was something that he had developed himself. And I always said that it is all the dark sides of Samuli put together into a character. So he was sort of able to access something that was inside of him, and when he, created that character, and sort of the reactions and everything. So in that sense, it was quite a true and quite an honest performance. Maybe technically not necessarily technically always precise, but he really believed in that character. I really believed in that character, so it was relatively easy with that in that sense. That but it just took so much time because his role was so big in there. But that was part of the fun.
It wasn't just the visual effects that were impressive. Remember, this was like in the early 2000s. YouTube didn't come out until later in 2005, and even then, it only supported 10-minute videos. Monetization, platforms, algorithms, social media, all the tools that, in theory, make creating and sharing art easier now, did not exist back then. And yet, they gained a huge following before the movie was even released. Finnish media caught on to the story and helped the public keep tabs on the project. While all this stuff might have seemed pretty off-kilter, these guys were actually pretty forward-thinking.
I think we were all quite nerds, and we were very early adopters of all kind of things of the internet. So we had, we started our pre-internet time on the BBS and bulletin boards and modem-based stuff. So we were very interested in where this direction of the world was going. And then when we started to work on Star Trek, internet really started to come available for more and more people. When we released the movie, internet was not something that everybody was accessing all the time. We obviously didn't have smartphones. Like you said, there was no YouTube. There was no, a lot of the tools that we take for granted nowadays. But one thing which there was already was the torrents and sort of BitTorrent kind of a based thing. And that was something that when we were thinking about how do we distribute this, because we can't really put this onto the internet and then put it on a server and let people download it, because that was very expensive then. But then we started. Then we researched and started to think about the torrent technology, and decided that we're going to use BitTorrent as our main method. So we're basically just putting it out for the BitTorrent, and then people can start, downloading and spreading and distributing it using that technology. And obviously that technology was already then used for piracy, film piracy and whatever, music piracy, but it had never been really used to actually distribute, something that you're allowed to distribute there. And we were really the first ones to employ that technology for that, you would say, like for the good way it was allowing a possibility. And that was also one of the reasons that it became so big, was that we really did something that nobody had ever done, which is release a free feature-length film that's available for anybody to download on the internet at any time. And like I said, it was before YouTube. I think YouTube came out in 2005 when Star Trek came out as well, but a little bit later. And also it was obviously only available for 10-minute clips back in those days, very low quality. So that wouldn't have worked anyway for us until much later. Nowadays, it's obviously out there on YouTube and everywhere. But yeah, then it was just a BitTorrent network, and it really worked pretty well for us. It got, I think on the first day got like 1 million downloads, and on the first week, like a couple of million, 5 million downloads. And it's like never before seen for a Finnish movie. Finnish movie had never been seen by so many people around the world as Star Trek was seen. So it was also an important part in that, because also it's a Finnish language movie in the end, which is quite weird that it got so interested all over the world. It was all spoken in a weird language only a couple of million people in the world even understand. But obviously we had the subtitles and we had the torrent distribution, so it could really reach all the corners of the world, and that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, on your website, you talk about how, just to use your words, Finnish audio-visual culture is at a crucial turning point. What do you mean by that?
Finnish audiovisual culture is weird state right now. We're so used to making movies that are just for our own country. So do Finnish language movies that really serve the Finnish audience and don't really travel outside. There's only a couple of films that have really traveled outside, and obviously Star Trek was the first one of those. And then Iron Sky later on, when Iron Sky came, that really reached, that was a Finnish movie that spread all over the world. And after that, there's only a couple of examples like that happening. And I really think that it really needs a big attitude change from the part of Finnish film industry to really start looking outside of Finland and focusing on and supporting films that are meant for international distribution, because the further we move in the world, the more connected the world becomes, and the more connected cultures become. We need to be able to offer these movies. We need to be able to create movies that have a chance to spread all over the world, whether it's in Finnish language or English language movies. And that's one of those things. But the problem is that the sort of the Finnish audiovisual culture is very traditionalist in that sense, that they are not very interested in. A very good example is, for example, just simple subtitles. My wife is a British woman, and I would love to show her a lot of Finnish movies. We have a great wealth of interesting Finnish movies, but they don't even subtitle them in English. They subtitle each one of those movies in Norwegian, in Swedish, in Danish, in Icelandic, and that in Norwegian, but never in English. And I'm like, these are basically the same language. And then Finnish is obviously a different language, but all of these other Nordic languages, they're the same language. Why do they need to have 7 different subtitles, but never the Finnish one? So it's very hard for people outside of Finland to really enjoy the Finnish film culture, and that is always a little bit sad.
I'm curious what you think the reasoning behind that is. I mean, I
think it is that it's very conservative thinking on behalf of Finnish film and culture, and Finnish culture has had little bouts of spreading outside of Finland. There was a music culture sort of thing which was happening in 90s and early 2000s. There was a couple of bands like Darude, there was Him, there was Nightwish, a couple of those bands that sort of started to make some headway outside of Finland and started to become internationally well known. But the problem was that when that happens, that's when Finnish system, the government and private investors, they need to really start pushing, investing and supporting those moments, because those moments are very rare. And when that kind of thing happens, you need to find power to really establish it, so it isn't just a blip, that it actually becomes a thing, because nowadays they can become an important part of your national identity if they are being supported. But I think one of the problems with film industry in Finland is that obviously there's, of course, not a lot of money. That's the problem with all film industries. But also there's not a lot of clarity to see that, okay, there is now a moment, the movie is making rounds on the outside of Finland in international markets. That needs to be tapped into. That needs to be supported very heavily, so that can actually take the best out of that situation.
Earlier, when I said that science fiction can be a social mirror, I didn't just come up with that idea all on my own. At least not the phrasing anyway. It's something I talked about with Timo. When he made Iron Sky in 2012, Finland was caught in the middle of an increasingly globalized world and rising nationalism at home and abroad. Again, we're dealing with a wild and funny premise, a colony on the far side of the moon founded by Nazis. But it tells a deeper and more serious story.
Dark side of the moon, and we come in peace!
Who are these guys anyway?
Nazis from the moon.
Iron Sky is very heavily a movie created around the red flags that I was viewing in the world. And obviously it takes a very hardcore subject matter, which is Nazis and sort of nationalism, but it also binds it into the world. Like I said, back in when I did Aristotle, there was a bunch of really red flags waving around in politics and in the world and in the attitudes and in the atmosphere, which direction the world was going. And unfortunately, the world has continued to go deeper and deeper in. But I've always made films, especially films that I'm writing myself, are very heavily talking about authority and the direction that the world is going through, sort of trying to spotlight, maybe spotlight is the world, spotlight some of the things that authoritarianism is driving the world into. And I find myself doing stories, usually somehow satirical science fiction kind of stories about authoritarianism in different shapes and forms. And almost like a little warning, like if we allow things to go like this is what is going to happen, and we don't want it to be like that. So that's the sort of ideological portion of my movies. And yes, Star Trek has that. I mean, in the end, Star Trek is talking about Emperor Pirk creating this empire that is just quite a horrible empire, and then taking over different parts of the galaxy and of the world. And then Iron Sky obviously follows in the same vein because of the Nazis and the Nazis coming to Earth and starting their campaign over there. And then the future movies that I'm working on also seem to have very similar tone. So yeah, it is a topic that I like to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of mentioned art being kind of this cultural mirror. It seems like satire is weirdly a pretty effective tool for that. I mean, I think like I'm a documentary guy myself, so I'm more biased towards documentaries, but I think there's no argument that stuff like South Park and other satires and comedy tends to be a pretty effective vehicle to kind of tell these stories about like where we're headed.
What it does is it always like it places the viewer, it sort of takes the viewer out of their own sort of box or their own sort of vantage point, and it places them into a different vantage point, because it is allowing humor and comedy and satirical content there. So it is clear that this is not exactly as the world is, but actually it allows you a different perspective into the world that we are living in, and thus allows you to inspect that from a different place, and gives you some tools that are because you can't walk around in your own world and sort of your own relationships or your own country and government stuff and all that, and look at it as, oh, this is such a hilarious satirical thing, because it's happening to you and it's happening constantly. It's all around there. But if you're watching a story that is completely satirical and ridiculous, but it's still talking about the same topics, it allows you to really view those things a little bit deeper, a little bit from a different perspective, and allows you to form in your head the thought processes that are sometimes hard to reach in your everyday world when you're walking around and just inspecting and watching the world go by. It's very hard to look at it as a satire. But when somebody does a satire about that, you're able to see something a little bit different. So I find it very strong tool, but you have to know how to use it very well, and that was one of the things, for example, with Iron Sky, because we have a very harsh topic like Nazism, Nazis. They are not a joke by definition. I mean, these are heinous, horrible war crimes that took place, crimes against humanity that took place and killed millions and millions of innocent people because of that. So making that into a satirical tool, you have to be careful. You have to understand the tool quite precisely before you really go into using it, because otherwise you can create a counter effective, it can turn against yourself, and then you find yourself in a big trouble if you don't know what it is that you're using it. So there is that challenge with satire, so you have to know what you're doing.
What else are you working on? Got any other projects you're pretty jazzed about?
Yeah, right now there's a film called Altered, which is coming out. It's a science fiction film. Also, it's about sort of gene technology. Tells a story of this guy of this world where gene technology has made people into these sort of evolved people into to give them abilities that would not be possible in normal ways. Sort of gene technology way. And then there is a small portion of those people to whom these genetic enhancements just don't work, and they become the scum of the earth because they are not evolved enough compared to the rest of the world. And obviously our hero is one of those people and starts to fight in defense of humanity as a whole, and the fact that humankind can only evolve if it evolves together as a group, and so that's a science fiction film that's coming out now later this year. And then I'm right now developing a science fiction trilogy called Deep Red, which is about communists on Mars, which is obviously big project that we've been sort of dreaming to make for a long time, and now finally we are decided that okay, now is the time to start building that, and that's something that's gonna take a lot of my attention for the next in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, sounds like that's a pretty common theme you see in all mediums of science fiction, dating back to as long as the genres existed, that both symbiotic and destructive relationship people have with scientific advances in technology of like.
Yeah, it is. And it's like, nowadays, obviously, these discussions go very much into, and have been in the science fiction, but nowadays even more with the artificial intelligence and sort of what artificial intelligence can bring you, what it can, what kind of future that is going to lead into. And nowadays, especially because artificial intelligence tools have become so accessible to everybody, they are not just anymore stories about science fiction stories, but nowadays it's not very far to say that you push a button and it creates you a movie, or creates you an album full of songs on it, or creates you a book, which is really competing with the human creativity. And if that can be used for creativity, it can be used for everything, to warfare, to mass control, people control, the politics and all of that. And that creates, obviously, the very big question is, what is humanity and what is our role in the future? And that's one of the things and the topics that is very interesting to me. And in Altered, I speak of that through gene technology and sort of gene advancements. And with Deep Red, we are also talking very much about artificial intelligence and which direction that is going to take the world and the humans. So yeah, these are topics that are very, very interesting for science fiction films and stories.
Star Trek started out as a teenager's hobby and morphed into something that resonates with people all over the world, even 20 years later. This was truly a rogue enterprise that combined passion and innovation and launched the careers of Timo and Samuli to new heights. But maybe its most important legacy is this idea that a few friends can create a whole universe from a basement and develop a long-lasting friendship in the process. I think I liked that story best, and its final chapter has yet to be written.
I spoke with somebody actually, and I mentioned that I'm going to do this interview and talk about Star Trek, and I asked that would he like to, instead of me, do this, because it was more of his baby in the end. And he said that he unfortunately couldn't do it because he's quite busy, but he wanted me to say to everybody listening to this that he is right now developing a continuation to the Star Trek. And that's something that is very much on his radar in the future. And myself and him have been discussing quite a lot on what would be the next Star Trek and what it would require. And those discussions have now taken a few steps forward, and hopefully we will see the next Star Trek in the coming times.
Crew Collective is presented by Rocket Genius. Our executive producers are Matt Medeiros and Travis Tots. This episode was written, edited, and produced by me. I'm Stuart Barefoot. More episodes are available at crewcollectivepodcast.com or anywhere else you get podcasts. Next time on Crew Collective, it's our final episode of Season 1. When you got an email from a random guy, me, about making a podcast somewhat focused on outer space. Did that surprise you?
No, no, not really. Sometimes I get emails like that and it's like a little bit off kilter and I'm like, yep, that's my people out there.